I'm working to help enterprises in terms of becoming faster in their ability to deliver business value. And what I find is many times a company will say, well, we've implemented Agile, we have new technologies, we have lots of tools, and we may have some certified processes, SAFe, ITSM, whatever they are, but yet it doesn't seem to be moving the needle in terms of the business being happy with us. So what's going on here that's creating this? I think when you take a step back, what we see is you have to start somewhere, and Agile is a good place to start, and code to cloud is certainly necessary. However, what's missing many times is connecting back to the business. I think when we talk about, and Tony talks about blueprint, that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of, do we actually increase the flow across the entire value stream, not just code to cloud, but from ideation all the way through the delivery of business value? And part of the need in order to do that is to have a true north. Your true north isn't around doing something, doing Agile, doing DevOps. It's really around focusing on accelerating that delivery of business value and being able to reduce that flow time from an idea or hypothesis of what will provide value to actually provide that delivery and get feedback. So I think it's very important for companies to have that true north. And once you have that, then you're going to say, okay, what's keeping us from going faster? And this gets you into this concept of value stream management. It's a new concept. It's a new category that Forrester created last year, and it's really around a new way to manage software delivery from strategy, focusing on products and their value streams. And in Mick's book, he develops this concept of the flow framework, which really lays this out, and also lays out our product strategy. Because in order to go fast, in order to flow work, the work that you're doing is really implemented within the tools that you have to develop your capabilities for the business. So, at the bottom of the flow framework, at the foundation, are the concept of these tools, right? The blueprints, the storytellers, the other tools that you may have for Agile management, IT service management. Connecting the flow of that work then allows you to see where things are going and where they're not. And then our new product, Tasktop Viz, provides flow metrics to actually show you how fast things are moving and where things, most importantly, aren't. And I'll be talking about that a little more as we move forward here. So the flow framework is really the how to navigate this journey from project to product. And again, there's the concept of the flow metrics and then also the business results. But it all starts with the type of work that you're actually tracking. So what really flows in software delivery? Well, there's features, and that's something we're most familiar with. And this is really the focus of projects. Projects focus on features. In fact, projects tend to limit their focus to just features. But when you're starting to look at a product and a value stream, features are important, but they're not the only thing. You also have defects, obviously, which are also pulled by the customer in order to improve the quality. But then you have risks, and these aren't project management kinds of risks. These are risks that are surfaced through security scans, other things that could impact vulnerabilities you may have in your software. It could impact regulatory issues you might run into. Risks are typically not thought of as a first-class work item in a project world. Many times it's hard to prioritize this work. It's hard to get it into the pipeline of work that's being done when it's competing with features or critical defects. So that's an important thing and an important differentiation with a product model. And then there's debts. And debts here are investments in making things faster. They could be technical debt, but it could also be anything that's people, process, technology. It could be a process improvement. It could be any of the DevOps practices that you're implementing to try to drive an improvement. And these items are MICI, mutually exclusive and comprehensively exhaustive, which means this really represents all the work that should be being done in terms of software delivery. They should fall into one of these 4 categories. So let's go through some scenarios that we sometimes see. In a push to market, feature work is done and it takes priority, which makes sense. But along that way, defects build up. And as a result, quality, because of the debts that build up while you're doing that feature work, the quality goes down and the defect work then starts to go up. So if you're not careful here, what happens is you can fall into a debt spiral where all your debts and risks continue to rise, and to the point where your feature work slows to a crawl. And these are the kind of examples that we've seen with companies who don't pay attention to debt and eventually fall into this debt spiral where they're not able to get hardly any new features done because it becomes so hard within this code base, within this structure, to get new work done because they're constantly dealing with the defects that have been created. So as an alternative to that is an example of something that happened with the Microsoft example of trustworthy computing, where basically the decision was made, we're going to quit doing feature work. So this is a time when Microsoft, was basically, was very competitive, and they were saying, we have to pay down our debts in order to allow ourselves to get faster in the future. So they stopped feature work and really focused on their debt work. And as a result of that, they reduced their debts and risks, their quality improved, and then their feature velocity improved, which obviously delighted their customers. So this idea of paying off your debt, of keeping your debt and risk visible, is very important if you're going to continue to have healthy products to serve your customers. So that really introduces a new way of thinking around product value streams. Right, up until now, IT has been viewed to be disconnected from business and the vision. We're tracking activities, not results. Many times we're tracking how many people are using a tool, or how many people have been trained. Those aren't really the results that the business cares about. Project management is fundamentally goes against some of these concepts, and business feels that IT is solving its own problems, and not delivering more. So many times IT is viewed to be a cost center as opposed to a profit center. If you're a cost center, the business is going to want to reduce your costs. If you're a profit center, the business is going to want to invest in you. And so, we really need to embrace this concept of a product and product value streams in order to address this gap between IT and business and get us to speaking in the same language. And that's across all these dimensions. I'm not going to go into all these today, but for example, the concept of teams. Many times in the project model, people are brought to the project. In a product model, the work is brought to the team. So you establish teams around products. These teams stay together. They're high-performing teams. They're empowered, and you bring the work to the teams. And the teams then address all types of work, the features, the defects, the risks, and the debt to keep that product healthy. So there's different types of value streams. Many are external, but most of them are internal, right? They may be shared services, shared teams. They're actually feeding your external value streams. And the most important product you probably have is your delivery pipeline. However, it's our experience that very few customers actually treat that, very few enterprises treat that as a product and architect it that way. So what are those characteristics of a product value stream? Well, it's the end-to-end flow of all work for that product. It spans ideation all the way to delivery. It's all value streams start and end with the customer. with a benefit delivered and then receiving feedback. And again, they have a notion of all the work, all the flow items. So this brings up then a new way of measuring. If you really believe that your true north is accelerating the delivery of business value, and you realize that you need to improve that, then the first thing you need to be able to do is measure it. Because if you don't have a baseline for it, you really don't know if the things you're doing is improving that. So that brings up some key questions, right? How long is it really taking for features to get through this value stream? How much wait time are there for defects, right? When is work waiting? People will keep busy. It's work that waits and piles up and is sometimes invisible. And we don't know where that is, then we don't know what to do to address it. And then also, what's the distribution across the different types of work? If you're looking at a value stream and all you see is features or features and defects, and you don't see an investment in risk and debt, that's probably a sign of a problem, that this product is not going to continue to be healthy and be able to delight your customers. So within the flow framework, these are the flow metrics that have been defined. One is a flow distribution. It's a measure to see trade-offs. So it shows you how much work is being done across all those types of items. So again, if you're not investing in debt, if you're not investing in risk, you can have those conversations with your product owner. Flow velocity, which is a measure of throughput and productivity, how many things are getting done within a time period. Flow load is important because it's the amount of work in progress. So we know that the more work in progress, the more WIP a team has, the less productive they are. So you need to keep a pulse on that to make sure that you're not sending too much work into teams and they're not being able to finish because they constantly are starting new work. They need to stop starting and start finishing in order to produce value at an accelerated pace. Flow time is that measure of speed. How long are things taking? And then efficiency is really this work versus wait ratio. Again, do we know where work is waiting so that we can mitigate that and create continuous improvement items around that? But then along with that, you want to be able to look at the business results, right? What is the value? It might be a P&L, but it might, for an internal product, it's something else, right? What is the value that your customers are getting out of using your product? You know, what's the cost of that product? What is the quality? Is it escape defects, production incidents? What's a key indicator of that? But then also, what's the happiness? And it's not the happiness of the customers, which is important to measure, but it's actually the happiness of the product team itself, because we know that happy teams are productive and productive teams are happy. So if you see the happiness of the team starting to go down, that's probably something to look at as a sign of either too much WIP for this team that's bogging them down, or they're not able to invest in debt to make things go faster. But there's something there that you need to look into based on the happiness of that product team and the results of that. And then what's the point? Well, the point is that flow metrics are tied to business value, right? Just measuring flow for flow's sake is not enough. It needs to be tied to that business value. They're based on outcomes. This is actually how work is moving as measured in your tool chain. So this is like the digital footprint of how work is. It's not a guess, it's not an assumption. It's actually measuring that work as it moves from ideation all the way to production. They provide a feedback loop to improve decisions. So if you can see where work is waiting, where things are slowing down, you can try something and then see, did that actually improve things? And so this goes back to a new way of architecting it, right? I like to talk about Deming a lot, and every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. So are we actually architecting our value streams for speed of delivery? You know, what are some of the concepts then that go into that? You really have to architect and integrate for the flow of and speed of delivery. And in order to know how fast you're going, you need to implement those flow metrics. And then you use those metrics in retrospectives and you ask, what is slowing us down? how can we go faster? Your teams probably have many ideas already about things that they believe could help you, but they don't have a mechanism in order to do data-driven continuous improvement. So being able to create a continuous improvement item, which in itself is a DET, it's an improvement to go faster, and then running an experiment, see did that actually achieve the results. A lot of things that you can see when you look in that is you may have SLAs or other things that can be replaced with self-service. You may be able to change some process, implement a process improvement, one of the DevOps practices, or it may be refactoring of some of the code base. But whatever it is, it gives you an opportunity to do that and create those continuous improvement initiatives, which can then be prioritized with other work and made visible. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tony, and he's going to talk a little bit about Storyteller.
Yeah, let me just.
Okay, we're just flipping over. Take 1 second. Okay, well, thanks very much, Carmen. And yeah, so what we want to do is walk you through Storyteller, which is a platform that supports, of course, the Flow framework, but other major use cases as well. And I think you'll get a sense of that as we walk through. Where I'd like to start is just to provide a little context before I get into showing you the product. So there are, in any large-scale enterprise, key stakeholders or constituents whose needs we need to address. This is stereotyping, of course. Every company is a little different, but of course we have lines of business we're trying to serve, customers that we're trying to deliver value to ultimately. We have constraints coming in from all angles. In the industries we serve, financial services, insurance, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, they're heavily regulated industries, so we have constraints flowing in from those stakeholders. And then, of course, an abstract one I just put, architecture, development, everything from legacy applications and the constraints that imposes, and the list goes on, of course, but internally imposed. And then if I kind of go to the other end of the spectrum, user stories are really, I guess you would say, the currency of work that takes place in Agile teams. And of course, they can be abstracted up, whatever your taxonomy happens to be, epics, themes, but there's still quite a distance between those major enterprise level stakeholders and the actual work on the ground that we're doing sprint over sprint over sprint. And there are artifacts such as these. And again, you'll have your own, it'll differ. But essentially what we're doing here is going from their needs or their problem, gaining an understanding, evolving that down into a solution that's articulated through a series of work items or user stories that we move forward with in a flow framework, as Carmen described. And what we've experienced is going from enterprise to enterprise, there's no real consistent, standard, methodical, controlled way that people seem to be managing all of that information in the middle. And that really, in a nutshell, is what Storyteller was designed to do. If I look at the classic DevOps loop, where we would map ourselves on that loop, would be in this, and again, there's different variations of the DevOps loop, but discovery design side. Again, for large-scale enterprises, that's the customer base we serve. And then the solution definitions that organizations would define using Storyteller would, of course, feed a build, verify, production cycle, all the way looping back to us monitoring it in production and then being able to react in subsequent sprints. Conceptually at a high level, because everybody asks us, well, we have Jira, where does Storyteller fit in relation to that? This is the way I tend to describe it. We are focused very much on what I would call, again, discovery design, whereas Jira and Rally and many, many other platforms like that, or at a higher level vantage point, road mapping tools like ATHA or Jira Line, et cetera, that aggregates progress from multiple instances. That's all I would refer to as on the build side. So Storyteller is complementary to all of those platforms that focus on coordinating the work of multiple people across multiple teams, resolving the dependencies as they move forward on a sprint cadence to deliver value. That's on the build side. Storyteller, again, is focused on discovery design, and I do caution this does not mean big upfront. This is done, again, at the same cadence as the build cycles. What I want to do now is just flip over and give you a quick introduction to Storyteller before I go to the main demo, just so you can orient yourself. Many folks never having seen the product before. So here's the UI for Storyteller. I have a very simple project open with just a few artifacts. And the first thing I'll do is just add a new artifact. And again, we support many different types. The most simplest probably is just a textual requirement. So I'll call it my third requirement. And of course, these can be subclassed to be whatever you want, but all the artifacts in Storyteller support custom properties. You define what those properties are that make sense in your environment. Just a few by way of example. And you can start typing in a description, of course, as we move along. Now, these artifacts can also be traced to any other information, either within this workspace or across the whole repository. So for example, I can just start typing and it'll automatically resolve and discover, again, within this particular workspace, but I could search across the whole repository. And then I just pick the things that I would like to establish relationships with. So it is that simple. Or when I'm typing in line, I can just go crosshatch financial officer, let's say. Oops, didn't type quite fast enough. And you can find, again, it automatically resolves again within or across the repository. So the information that we did establish relationships with, let me just publish that off. You can get a preview on the right-hand side. And if I go to, let's say, the first one, you can navigate around with these relationships, of course, so you can see rich text, you can have links, obviously incorporate pictures, etc. Also, to the right-hand side of note is we can have inline threaded discussions. So when I'm working with distributed teams, etc., we can all have conversations about the items being worked on. And of course, that could be through your mobile device, iPhone, what have you, since it's all email enabled. And each and every artifact also has a comprehensive history trail that's automatic. And we can revert back to prior versions. We can do comparisons and so on. The other thing I just want to introduce you to quickly is the fact that it's not just textual. It has full graphical modeling capabilities in Storyteller. So you can just drag things out, of course. With just a few clicks, we can start lining them up. And that's whether it's, business process modeling, information models, conceptual models, what have you. All of that is possible. Last thing is, as you get more and more information in the system, of course, you want to start to organize this. So you can structure it however you want. You can have templates that define a structure or go more freeform, but literally it's through hierarchies of folders we can organize our information to make it manageable. If I open one up that just shows you something that actually has information in it, now that you're more acclimatized to the product, you can see where we have on the execution side various trains. We have solution intent. We have all the way back up to high-level strategy with portfolio epics and themes, boiling down into functional epics versus enabler, and so on. Of course, this is following a safe model, but just to show you the amount of content that we can have in the system. All right, so what I'd like to do now is walk you through, I guess, sort of a broad brush of the capabilities of the product now that you have been oriented to it. And I'll do it across three major areas of capability: centralized data, visual collaboration, and agile automation. So if I start with centralized data, it's the list of capabilities that we've chosen on the left-hand side that I just want to walk you through quickly today. So first of all, we of course have high-level visibility. We hold a broad range and a wealth of information within Storyteller, and of course we want to expose that through dashboards and analytics, and we have those capabilities. As you can see here, slice and dice the data pretty much however you want. Also feeding the Tasktop infrastructure as well, so you can look at things through a flow framework lens, which we'll actually get to toward the end. Now on the left here, you can see Storyteller has multiple workspaces. I had a couple open before. Here's a few more here. We can literally have hundreds, even thousands of workspaces in a repository. You can open as many as you like to work on, have information cross between them, relationships between them, copying, reuse between them, for example. Also, as you can see, the information is structured hierarchically, which not all tools let you do. Not all of them are as intuitive. And one thing we learned early on is the information that folks do have here, they like to have laid out, especially when you have high volume, in sort of an Excel style and be able to edit it in place. And the product lets you do that as well. Now for every item in Storyteller, like this feature, as you can see that I have open, this mobile spend tracker feature, we automatically track the versions, as I mentioned before, and you can revert, compare historical versions. You can even merge between multiple historical versions if you want to do a reversion that's fairly complex that way. Again, like I say, when you can select multiple, you can see through track changes who did what, when, and why they did these things. And on the relationships tab to the right that I introduced you to earlier, we can have here you can see some non-functional requirements, but you can relate to pretty much any other type of information in the system. And what's fairly unique to Storyteller is those relationships can become very precise. So in terms of graphical models, they can be to individual shapes, but in terms even textual requirements, you can have these inline traces, as I mentioned. So if it's a long set of paragraphs, you can actually be extremely precise in terms of your traces to other artifacts. And it's this precision that so many of our customers value in our product, because the lack of that gives rise to so many assumptions and miscommunications that result in wasted work or worse. With all of that traced information, it's good to be able to pull back and get a bird's eye view of it. You can select any item. In this case, we selected a regulatory change, in fact, that came in that affects our software cycle under, so I guess, the risks category that Carmen introduced earlier. And we can see everything downstream that is related either directly or indirectly to it. In other words, that may be potentially affected or impacted. So again, many of our customers today who before they had used our product very often were trying to do this type of work with documents, spreadsheets, which was just horrendous given the volumes of information that they had to deal with. I alluded to earlier how in Storyteller you can reuse any of the content. And there is a built-in reuse feature which makes a copy and a special relationship between the original and the reused. So you can use that to enforce standards. You can use it for opportunistic reuse where I just want to save time, not having to redo the same work. Regardless, between those two, you can reconcile. So if they do become out of sync, you can choose essentially to overwrite one to the other or to actually do a detailed merge of the information in the two. So it is really quite powerful. When we're dealing again with high volumes of information, you want to be able to take subgroupings of it to work on. In this particular example, I just said, hey, I have something called work order 85. Maybe I have, I don't know, 5,000 pieces of information or artifacts in this workspace, and I just want to focus in on these 12 with a group of people to do work on. So we would pull those together into something called a collection. You can have as many collections as you like, and it really is literally just a collection of artifacts you choose for purposes of work and drive them through a workflow. And as they get more mature and you want to then go into things like review cycles, you can transform these into baselines, which are more locked down at point of time. So we can then go in and get formal reviews, formal approvals for them, if that's the type of process you need to facilitate. So that was a quick walkthrough of some of the data centralization, as we refer to it, capabilities. What I want to do now is just take a moment and focus on some of the visual collaboration that we have within the product. So I already referred, excuse me, to the threaded discussions. And while you can engage in these discussions either in the product or through, again, mobile device or remotely, there's also other degrees of precision going on here. If you look very closely, you can see comments were applied to specific versions of artifacts. Because these artifacts change over time, it's important to know when somebody made a comment, which version are they talking about? Again, another source of miscommunication if you don't have that. Powerful visual modeling is another thing, of course, that Storyteller has. I've showed you a few models so far, but the breadth of the range of modeling is really quite extensive. Organizational or structural models, as you see here, logical domain or information models, even conceptual models when we're trying to communicate complex concepts. Interaction diagrams or sequences, user interface mockups. All of this is supported in this single platform. And again, what's really important is the interrelationships and dependencies amongst all of the information that's presented through these visual models. So again, we can trace very precisely to any individual shape or item that's part of the visual model. Now, the models can range from low-level technical design level models, as I mentioned, but all the way up to, for example, a business value stream, showing something at a very high level, how business processes add value, expose waste and bottlenecks in the delivery of products and services to customers. So that's more, of course, a sort of an internal view to the enterprise. If I look more from an external view, I'd be looking at things like customer journeys. So we can support those as well. And then want, as I said, through the interrelationships to be able to drill down. So perhaps in service provision, I'm going to drill down to using and monitoring the services, which is a business process. You can further drill down, let's say on track spending, for example, and get detailed flows as to how that's performed. Comparisons month over month is another drill down. Choose date range and filter. So there's no limit to the number of levels of detail you can drill down, meaning you can model processes of virtually any degree of complexity. And many of our customers have extremely complex processes that they are trying to represent. Now here, for example, is one of the lowest level models we would have, where we can actually toggle to expose system responses to user action. So this is more of a user system interaction model that you can augment with screen mockups, wireframes, drawings. And when you do that, you can flip it into a walkthrough mode, more like a storyboard. You're just kind of executing that process, but from the vantage of the mockups or wireframes. So here as a user, I want to specify date ranges. So you can report the scope of interest, and you can continue through this. And this is an excellent way to review what it is we intend to implement and get that valuable feedback before spending time actually implementing. Agile automation is the next thing I want to show. So using those models I just referred to before, and don't forget, these are aligned all the way back up to, as I said, customer journey, business value stream. They take into account all of those constraints through traceability, like regulatory obligations, business rules, policies. So we've gone through all that, so we know this is a very integral process. What we can then do with that is automatically generate assets like functional tests, the kind that would go into, you know, an HPALM, or there's a myriad of other tools out there doing functional testing with traditional style tests. There's a shot of HPALM, for example, with those tests in it, but of course any other tool we can drive into as well. Now, of course, for Agile development teams, which is the bulk of our customer base, what we want to do is take that model, and we can literally transform it into, I would say, a set of starter user stories. So this information, everything you see here, was extracted from that process. So it's a well-structured story. As a user, I want to select date range so I can scope the report. It also puts out given, when, then, which we bundle up into a gherkin, but also present here under an acceptance criteria field. And those mock-ups also are valuable, as they can really represent a before, after, if you will. And even when it gets complex, we can have multiple. So from that very simple process I showed you a moment ago, we would get a series of stories out, which we can view in Storyteller. And again, what it has with it is a set of information that goes along with it, like that gherkin that we can feed down into Git and ultimately into other platforms to be fleshed out and executed. We can also automatically push this over, in this case, to Jira, so you can see that story in Jira as part of my product backlog that then needs to be allocated to sprints, and it comes over with the gherkin and with those visual attachments, kind of like a package, again, now to be prioritized. The same set of information back in Storyteller. I just showed you how we can move it to downstream tools, but many of our customers still need to produce documentation. All of that information is available to be automatically generated into documents to facilitate whatever the needs are of our enterprise customers. And that would be based on templates, so it would adhere to their corporate documentation standards. I didn't spend much time on it, but did want to let you know at least that there is a configurable workflow in the platform. This is an administrator's view setting up the workflow for a particular artifact type, but all the different kinds of artifacts can have their own independent workflows, and that can even vary as you cross the different workspaces. Today, for review, many organizations still have to manually try to pull together all this various information. Again, if it's in Storyteller, we can automatically bundle it into an online review. This just happens to be the dashboard where we're monitoring the progress of a certain review. We can see we have 15 participants reviewing 72 items, and the process across. We can even drill in to see specific individuals, what their role is, if they're a reviewer or an approver, what their status is and what they've looked at, what they haven't looked at, what they've rejected or accepted. So we can monitor this, to a very fine level of precision till we drive it to completion. Okay, and then this is just a repeat of a dashboard I showed you earlier, but again, given the volume of information we're talking about, we're driving it through workflows with a multitude of people driving development. We need to have visibility on this, so all the information in Storyteller is readily available to be visualized through a series of dashboards, and again, fed into the Tasktop technology to be able to be represented in the flow framework. And with that, I guess I will pass it back to Carmen.
Okay, thank you. So I think, that was a very powerful description of all the capabilities that you can see and how, for example, when you have those artifacts, for example, like things that may generate tests and things, when you see those artifacts and the flow that might resolve as a basis of those, right? Whether they be the requirements, whether they be, the defects that you're working on, those are the kind of things then that we can bring into play in terms of our product suite, both in terms of Hub and Viz, where Viz is our new product now that allows you to see where those bottlenecks are as you're going through the kind of flows that Tony described. And then Hub can sometimes then point you to Hub where you may be able to provide more integration, more capability to enhance your flow so that you can see, again, you can accelerate that delivery of business value that's going to your customer. So just a little bit about Viz. Again, this is a product that will be going GA later this year. Provides prescriptive flow metrics with no coding. So it actually records how work is happening and progressing based on these artifacts that are in your tool chain. And also protects the view of the business value of those portfolios, through some AI-driven modeling. We can also replay history to uncover the impacts of business decisions, how they impact your outcomes. So if you try something different, either from a business perspective in terms of the product itself, or internally in terms of your own process, right? A debt improvement that you made, a process improvement. How did that actually impact both the metrics and the resulting business results? Those flow metrics can be provided, again, with no coding, taking the information from those artifacts in your tool chain. So again, they provide out-of-the-box flow metrics. We connect to all the tools that you're using in the enterprise. We have the 60 connectors, so it's connector technology is what we utilize. They allow us, to interact with the things that Tony was talking about in the Blueprint product suite. We provide that instant data access. So we're giving you that digital footprint of how flow is happening, and it's a point and click multi-layered. So there's no plugins, no ETL, no data lakes. We're getting the information using our connector technology from the tools in your tool chain, aligning those artifacts to your product value stream, allowing you to map those into the features, defects, risks, and debt, and then model their states into new active waiting done. And from that, we provide the flow metrics with the reports out of the box that we discussed. So again, the idea of the flow framework and then mixed book is really to move from this concept of project and cost centers to product value streams and silos and proxy metrics that we have today to flow metrics and business results, and move from fragmented value streams to where you're only looking at part of the story to the integrated value stream network that allows you to see flow across your entire value stream associated with that product. So with that, here's a few resources, mixed book. There's also a free book from IT Revolution, Project to Product Transformation. There's also a book that Jack Marr and I wrote about digital transformation that has many of these concepts in them. So if you're asking how to get started, from the flow framework perspective, we provide free 1-hour consulting sessions where we'll help you identify some of the product value streams and visualize the flow and discover opportunities to improve your value stream. You can also schedule a demo where we can actually show you how measuring flow metrics can be done within your organization based on how work is currently done. No changes to how you're doing work. We just track the work as you're tracking it now within your tools, and then provide you with that visibility, as you make your journey from project to product. And if you want to read more, there's another link available of how to read more about the flow framework, flow metrics, and where to begin. And then Tony or Kate.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Carmen. And if you're interested in how you can get started with Storyteller, if you head on over to our website at blueprintsys.com/get-started, you can schedule a one-on-one demo with one of our solution experts. Ahead of that call, we like to really understand kind of what your goals are so that we can make sure we give you a really custom demo on and make sure your time is really spent well. And then if you're also looking to learn more about, scaling your Agile enterprise-wide, improving efficiency and alignment, we've got some really awesome resources on our website. So those are just available at blueprintsys.com/resources. So with that, I think we've got, if anyone has any questions, if you can just start popping those into the question box. It looks like we've got a couple sitting here, so we'll dive into those. So this first one here would be for you, Carmen. So Nils has asked, does Viz depend on using Hub?
No, that's a good question. It does not depend on using Hub. It uses that same, the connector technology is what's the common, it's common across Hub and Viz, but Viz, you can start with Viz. We can, again, point right to the repositories, the tools where your artifacts are, and we can provide flow metrics, provide the modeling and flow metrics capability. So there's not a dependency between Viz and Hub from that perspective.
Okay, great. And another question here for you. Someone's asked, how do we get started with the flow framework?
So again, I think looking, there's the book, obviously, that many people have read, but we also have a lot of those resources. Going back to this slide, there's a lot of those resources on the flow framework. And then, putting in a request, and we can start to work with you directly on, typically talking about your value stream, what tools you're using, and we start to actually show you, provide a visual value stream architecture doc description that we can provide you with to get you started about and see what makes most sense for you, right? Does it make most sense to start with integration, or are you more interested with the flow metrics to start with, in which case we can talk more about Viz.
Okay, awesome. Another question here from Christopher. It looks like this one's might be for both of you, and they've asked, how safe do we need to onboard? So I don't know if you want to go first there, Carmen. So using the Scaled Agile framework, how safe?
Yeah. So I think the thing with our technologies are, we have many of the early customers that we already have on our product, on the Viz product, are using Safe. But I think the key is our products and Viz will work with whatever methodology and whatever tool chain that you have within the 60 connectors that we connect to. So we have many customers using Safe, but we also have customers using different kinds of Scrum or Agile or combination of Scaled Agile frameworks. So, it's not required that you have a certain methodology, but we certainly support the mechanisms within Safe in terms of the modeling capabilities that you have, and customers using Safe are getting value out of the flow metrics that we're providing them.
No, I'll just add for Storyteller, it's a pretty similar answer in that we're basically methodology agnostic. I did show in several of the views of our product a Safe structure that just happens to be the one I picked. We have many customers using it in a Safe context, and configuring it for their tailored version of Safe, which is of course what you're supposed to do. But we have many customers using it under other approaches as well, disciplined Agile, for example, and actually quite a few just using their own, I guess you would say, hybrid approaches that they have evolved into. So there's nothing that restricts you to Safe. However, if you do choose to use Safe, we have experience doing it. We have templates to set up, and we have lots of customers as examples that you can draw learnings from.
Excellent. I know we're just almost at time here, just a few other questions. So someone's asked, what is the benefit of having flow metrics versus other standard metrics like DORA?
Question we get a lot. I mean, DORA metrics I think are necessary, and I sometimes describe it as it's kind of, you know, the first stage of a booster rocket. I mean, they get you into orbit. They're necessary for you to get a sense of where you are. But I think then you need to go beyond to talk about flow. You need to talk about lead time being from the ideation all the way through delivery, and you need to know where your bottlenecks are, because otherwise, of the plethora of DevOps practices, like in the DevOps Handbook, which is a great book, you need to know what is best for this particular product value stream. And that comes back to knowing where things are flowing, but more importantly, as my previous boss, Tom Pater, used to say, where are things stopping? And that's what the flow metrics provide, is that comprehensive view of flow and where things are waiting so that you can play the right improvement in order to improve that flow.
Okay, great. And just one last question here as we wrap up. So someone's asked, we have a mix of tools, including Jira, Rally, and we even do Waterfall. Can Storyteller support this kind of environment?
The answer is absolutely. In fact, every one of our customers have what I would call a heterogeneous environment, in other words, mixed. And they use our platform not just on one initiative. It tends to be cross-enterprise. And so they encounter multiple instances of, you know, tooling like Jira, like Rally, like version 1, as they go from department to department or business unit to business unit. And a single Storyteller platform can integrate in to multiple of those. In fact, through Tasktop technology is how it does that. And in fact, it doesn't even have to be Agile. Many of our customers are using, of course, Agile, every one of them, but also some of them still have some waterfall type or style initiatives going on. And they're using Storyteller to feed all of that, because at the end of the day, when you look at what's in Storyteller and you're going up and modeling business processes and information models, pulling in regulations, et cetera, and having your corporate policies and to what extent they and their business rules impact, that's all independent of how you're developing your systems. But it does impact them, and that does constrain the solutions you can design. So, so Storyteller kind of rides above and across all of that, which is a pretty powerful and unifying capability.
Excellent. All right. Well, it looks like that's the end of our questions, and we're just at time now. So just wanted to thank Carmen and Tony for delivering this really interesting and valuable content today, and to everyone who gave us their time to jump on this call. We really appreciate it. You'll be receiving a follow-up email likely sometime tomorrow that will include a copy of this webinar recording as well as the slides. If you have any questions, feel free to reply, and there's some links in there where you can get some additional information. So once again, thank you so much to everyone who was on the call today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. All right, thanks. Bye.